Greetings, esteemed audience, and welcome to the Age of Steel and Fire. Today, we continue our epic journey through the great battles that forged the fate of civilizations. In 1709, on the fields of Poltava, one empire fell, and another began to rise. This was not just a battle. It was a moment that reshaped the fate of Europe. In our series Battles That Changed History, today we dive into the Battle of Poltava, where mighty Sweden clashed with a rising Russia under the hand of Peter the Great. To grasp the significance of Poltava, we must rewind to the late 17th century, when Sweden stood as one of Europe's dominant military powers. Under King Charles XII, Sweden commanded a disciplined, elite army that had crushed Denmark, Poland, and even Russia at the Battle of Narva in 1700. But that victory sowed the seeds of a prolonged conflict, the Great Northern War, where a coalition of defeated nations sought to overturn Sweden's supremacy. Among them, Russia, led by Peter the Great, chose not to confront head-on. Instead, Peter reformed his military, built a navy, and transformed Russia from a feudal state into a rising modern power. After nearly a decade of war, Charles XII launched his boldest move, an invasion deep into Russian territory, aiming for a decisive blow. Yet he didn't realize that the Ukrainian plains, and the fortress town of Poltava, would become the graveyard of Sweden's imperial ambitions. This can be seen as a fateful campaign, when Charles XII decided to lead his troops deep into Russian territory. After nearly a decade of war, Charles XII launched his boldest move, a deep invasion into Russian territory, aiming for Moscow. But instead of taking the direct northern route, he marched south through Ukraine, a strategic decision fraught with risk. Along the way, the Swedish army faced harsh weather, difficult terrain, and, most critically, logistical collapse. They pinned their hopes on a new ally, Ivan Mazepa, leader of the Cossacks. Yet Mazepa brought only a few thousand men, and was himself under Russian pressure. This alliance, rather than strengthening Sweden, dragged Charles into a hostile, uncontrolled region, where Russian forces employed scorched-earth tactics, destroying supplies, burning villages, and retreating strategically to exhaust the invaders. From a strategic standpoint, this was a disastrous march. No stable supply lines. No territorial control. No reliable intelligence. And most of all, no time. By the time Charles XII reached Poltava, his army was no longer the elite force that triumphed at Narva, but a depleted, encircled force stranded in unfamiliar terrain. On June 28, 1709, dawn broke over the fields of Poltava. The Swedish army, exhausted from its long campaign, launched an assault. With Charles XII wounded, command fell to General Carl Gustav Renskild. Their plan: strike swiftly at Russia's defensive lines, a series of horseshoe-shaped redoubts built by Peter the Great to dominate the battlefield. Phase 1: Opening Assault. The Swedes advanced in two columns, aiming to breach the redoubts. But lacking coordination and artillery support, they were pinned down by Russian fire. Some units broke through, but became isolated and vulnerable. Phase 2: Russian counterattack. As Swedish formations faltered, Peter unleashed his regular infantry and cavalry. With superior numbers and artillery from the Poltava fortress, Russian forces overwhelmed the attackers. Swedish lines collapsed, unable to regroup. Phase 3: Total defeat. Charles XII fled south with a fragment of his army, while the bulk was encircled and forced to surrender. General Renskild and thousands of troops were captured. The Battle of Poltava ended in a decisive Russian victory, sealing the fall of Sweden's empire and heralding Russia's rise as a European power. After the final shots at Poltava, it wasn't just an army that collapsed, it was the balance of power in Europe that shifted. This defeat wasn't merely a military setback for Sweden, it marked the end of a century-long dominance. Charles XII, once hailed as the Northern War God, fled into exile in the Ottoman Empire, carrying with him a shattered army and a broken dream. The Swedish Empire rapidly declined, losing territory, political influence, and its international stature. Meanwhile, Russia, under Peter the Great, emerged from the shadows. No longer a backward feudal state, it became a rising power with a modern army, a formidable navy, and global ambitions. Geopolitically, Poltava allowed Russia to assert control over the Baltic region, securing vital trade routes, strengthen domestic authority, and accelerate military administrative reforms, expand influence across Central and Eastern Europe, gradually replacing Sweden's role in regional alliances. In the long term, Poltava was the launchpad for Imperial Russia. Peter built St. Petersburg as a symbol of modernization and Russia's gateway to the West. From that moment on, European history was no longer a Western affair. A new force from the East had arrived, ready to shape the century ahead. Poltava was not just the end of a war. It was the full stop to one empire, and the exclamation mark for another. From that blood-soaked field, Russia emerged with a new stature, ready to shape the century ahead. Sweden, once towering, faded into the shadows of history. History turns on moments like these, and Poltava was one of them. What if Charles XII had won that day? Would Europe look different today? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more battles that changed history.